Hello, my name is Dale Benedum. I'm the host and creator of the show Dale After Dark. The intent of the show is to provide a more relaxed, comfortable atmosphere without the chaos of chat rooms or open lines. Pre-recording one-on-one interviews with guest speakers have and continue to produce a much more enriched and relaxed process focusing on the contents being shared. As a host, I limit the amount of pre-written questions as well. This allows me to focus conversations more intently, as it should be. Topics discussed on Dale After Dark include UFO phenomena, worldwide social behaviors, politics, religion, and with insights on new emerging technologies for the health and welfare of the populace. So welcome, relax, and enjoy my show, Dale After Dark. Welcome back, everybody. This is part 2 with Dave Kane talking about Ormus, and we're going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of it, as well as some more of the history that we didn't cover in the last show. And again, we have no time limit. I have really no written questions. This is kind of like on the fly as we go. There's no hidden agendas, and we're just here to share information. Also on the show tonight is co-host of mine, Jack. Tobias was not able to be with us tonight, so welcome to the show, Jack and Dave.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dave, we're going to start with you tonight, and as we all know, Jack is knowledgeable with his crystals and the teachings of Marcel Vogel, and I'm sure he's going to have plenty of questions, and we're going to have comments and just good talk tonight. But Dave, I wanted to get back to the conversation that we left off with. You kind of gave us a scenario, gave us what this was. It's the what did you call it? The fifth element.
Fifth state of matter.
Fifth state of matter.
Yeah.
I wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of actually how you make this. What's the procedure, and what the materials you use?
Well, we usually use something called a wet method, and our root material is dissolving various salts, Dead Sea salt, redmond salt, Celtic salt, in a solution, and then we precipitate the material out using lye. And lye, well, the old recipe for lye was wood ash and water, which they've used for thousands of years, and then lye was used for all sorts of commercial things, everything from tanning to making soaps to what have you. And it's still used today. There's food-grade lyes and food processing and so on, So it's a very simple, common material, and it's basically a mixing wood ash and water. And you would end up with that material anytime you ever lit a fire. And if it would rain on the fireplace or whatever. We believe the reason that forests regrow prolifically 3 or 4 years after a fire is the fact that you're left with a wood ash from the fire. It then rains, so you have the water and the agitation from the rain, and that releases pockets of high alkaline lye, which releases the ormic material back to the environment. And that's why you get the prolific regrowth for 3 or 4 years after the fire. So, because they've never been able to explain it, But I think that's what's going on. So it's a natural process.
And you said in the first show, if you wouldn't mind going back and talking about white clouds, you think that how you suspect that this is actually ormic?
Yeah.
Ormus?
The first thing that kind of put me onto that was some of Zacharias Sitchin's renderings as science fiction books, but he translated Sumerian tablets for most of his working career, and he was an expert in ancient languages. And the story of the Anunnaki, which is relayed in the tablets, the reason they came to the earth was to mine gold because their atmosphere was depleted. And we always wondered about that. And what we discovered, I think, is that when you look at natural clouds in our atmosphere, they are Ormus precipitating out of the moisture in the atmosphere. And that's why they're white, because that's what the ormic material looks like. If you look at water coming off of your pot or your kettle or out of an irrigation spray system on a farm or a golf course, when you look at that, it's gray. It is not white. And yet we're told that clouds are water vapor. I don't think so. When it rains, the clouds dissipate. The ormic material comes with the rain. It has its own smell. It has its own thing. And everything springs to life. Like if it rains in the desert, and I mean, you're talking sand, you're talking limited nutrients in a lot of places, and just bang, everything's just prolifically brilliant in no time, you know. So, you know, there's a lot of, I don't know, it's just, it looks like it makes sense, and everything we look at seems to back it up.
Jack has a lot of knowledge about the Anu as well, Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. I'd like to meet one.
Jack?
Yeah? I don't know where you want me to begin with that, but...
Well, just let's just, anything comes to mind with the Anu. How much are you well-versed with Zecharia Sitchin and his work?
I may have seen some of his videos before, but I'm not too sure. Because I've seen several videos from different people. I just didn't read that much into them.
Dave, was it you that was telling me that these commandments were written on emerald tablets? Supposed to have been written on emerald tab. I think it was you that was saying that, wasn't it?
No, I've read about the emerald tablets, but I really haven't got enough knowledge to fill you in on that. Like there's a lot of other ancient stuff that pops to mind, like the Ica stones in Brazil and the Dropa people in China. I mean, the Ica stones are really interesting because they've been dated in France, or I'm sorry, in Germany and in Spain at between 100 and 120,000 years old. Mm-hmm. And these stones have renderings of people hunting on the backs of pterodactyls, and one stone has 5 different kinds of dinosaurs on it. There's a series of stones with very intricate, atomically accurate carvings showing these 2 people doing a heart transplant with tubes running to a pregnant woman for an anti-rejection material. That's 100,000 years ago. You know, it's most of what we're told is, the problem is we're being told by people who don't know anything, and they're not right. You know, so.
Oh, what you're saying is very interesting. So I remember in, one or two of Marcel's videos, is he was talking about his experience using one of the crystal skulls, and how he held this thing to his stomach, and by controlling his breath, he was actually able to get, according to the story, the entire skull lit up, and then him and the woman with him were taken back. It was the Mitchell Hedges skull, and he was taken back in mind, and they were in this giant temple with a skylight, and they were imparting knowledge from the wise sages, and they were putting it into the new children by putting one hand on top of the skull and putting their other hand on the child that was transferring the information to them. So what that means to me is, there's lots of different people, and like the different stories of Atlantis having crystalline technologies. I think that most of their records were not transcribed on papyrus scrolls or anything else. They were literally written in stone. And we think, oh, well, this chisels out in a stone like a tablet. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it was literally written, encoded into the stone, just like you format a floppy disk, or you write information on a compact disk today.
Well, the crystal skulls are, they're crystal. They're, I think, what are they, silicon dioxide or something like that? Look what we use today in computers to record knowledge. We're back to silicon again, silicon chips and stuff like that. So, maybe it's just a slight variation of something that we're slowly approaching through our own technical stuff. It's odd, there's 100-odd elements of the periodic table, and yet, bang, you're back to silicon again. There's a lot we don't know I mean, there's more we don't know than we do know. But there's more and more people starting, to open up and look at things and not accept what we've had jammed down our throats because it's not correct. The whole Egyptology thing it's incorrect, and they're guessing. I mean, in 1912, there was a guy called Flinders Petrie, a British expeditionist, and they opened up a tomb in Egypt, and he noted in his notes they had a complaint because what they had to do was shovel 50 tons of white powder out of the tomb in order to get to the frescoes on the wall. And they were shoveling out what looks like white powder gold, or Ormus gold, or manna, or mifkist, if you're, the Egyptians called it. The Arabs called it mifkist, the Egyptians called it showbread. So they shoveled all this stuff out and sent one bag of it back to the British Museum in 1912, and it's never been located since.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of interesting stuff. Lawrence Gardner, in his book, Lost Secrets of the Sacred Ark, thinks that the Ark was full of Ormus white powder gold because it would levitate. The Bible even says it would raise up and it would lift the people off that were carrying it. And then it would strike, if a soldier approached, it would strike him dead with a bolt of lightning. And I mean, these things, I think, are a lot more literal. Barry Carter did an experiment a little while back, and they had 25 people sitting in a circle, and the first and last people, the last fellow was grounded, and the first person touched the battery, and they all held hands. And what happened is the first and last person in the circle got the shock, and nobody in between. Then they substituted charged Ormus water for the battery, and put his finger in, a little spark jumped through his finger, and all 25 people in the circle got the shock. So then they went back and they did this, a couple of dozen times. So if it was electric, the first and last person got a shock. If it was ormic, everybody in the circle got a shock. So it's either a different kind of electricity or it's a different type of energy altogether. And it's, it's the ormic material in us that facilitates our internal messaging, because our internal messaging is not electric. It doesn't travel at the speed of light. It travels at the speed of sound. And our muscles react at roughly the speed of sound for everything that functions in our body. And I think, when people get struck by lightning, if we were electrical creatures, it should have blown every fuse we had. And you look at how many people survive these things. So
did you also
different energy force?
Did you also say in the first part or last week that you suspect that this material is not just three-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I think ormic materials are interdimensional. That said, I think there's a number of things that are interdimensional. I mean, the human mind is. The Tesla coils have an element of interdimensionality. Joe cells have the same thing. Orgon has the same thing, because these are all drawing energy or displacing energy from sources other than what's here. I don't know all the answers. I'm looking at things like other people, but every now and again I get stuff downloaded, and some of it's like bizarre until you try and figure it out. And a little while back I had this download come in just the middle of the night when you're in between that, awake and asleep thing.
Yeah.
And it just come down that everything we know and are familiar with, it says, though we are living in a hexagonal tunnel, our universe is in this hexagonal tunnel, like a beehive. And surrounding our reality, there are 6 more of these little tubules. And periodically, things are generated in our space or in their space, which transgress through this membrane, for a better word. But we have 6 of these membranes around us. So when we're sensing, anything from ghosts to paranormal to possibly, alien or whatever, but we've got these 6 parameters that have the ability to influence us and we get confused because we're not realizing these are from 6 potentially different places that may not be related to each other, but yet they all transgress into our territory and us into theirs. So it's
well, I'm just biting at the bullet because I want to I want to talk about what Jack and Tobias are able to do, and I've been friends with these guys now, what, going on 2 or 3 years, Jack. I can't remember. Time's flying by so fast. I think it's been at least 2 years. And
more than that.
It has been. Okay, I'm thinking more like 3. Well, what these guys can do, Dave, is Jack has the ability, as well as Tobias, to actually look inside people's bodies, and they've been using crystals to infuse, and they're able to infuse material that they could look up online. Matter of fact, I'm going to shut up and let Jack explain this in better detail, what he's doing. So, Jack, take it from here, please.
Well, I think it'll be interesting because this may be something that you may be able to grasp onto, Dave, and you may know something that we're not getting yet. But we know that what we do works because we've done it multiple times on all kinds of different people.
Including myself, and it works.
Oh, we worked a lot on Mr. Benedum here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums it up. I mean, we've used, through the aid of a crystal as a resonating site, because the crystal has a very symmetrical internal geometry. According to what Vogel said, is that the conformity of this crystalline lattice translates directly to our intuitive mind. So, like, the intuitive mind is very abstract, but when you have something that can channel it down into very, very coherent streams, like taking a diffused light and then training it into a laser, which is what a Vogel cut crystal does, more or less. It's a light diode. It can take something very abstract, like just intuitions, like you get a certain feeling. It's like you go into a certain house and you get the heebie-jeebies. Well, that's a psycho-intuitive thing. But if you're entrained to something like a crystal and you're holding it, then suddenly you may see faces, or you'll catch a glimpse of something that happened in the past in that house. You're seeing energy imprints of information there. So using this same methodology, we've trained ourselves to use crystals to use that same apparatus to see into people's bodies, to see what kind of things are going on in there, either emotional or physical trauma. We're pretty good at that we can even see what appears to be like intoxication, or foreign materials that are in the body, like if there's like a lot of sulfur in your body, which is something that we saw in Dale in the past.
Oh, yeah.
Which he confirmed later on from his trucking career. We've been able to see these things using the aid of the crystals. And on top of this, we've also been able to transmit certain energetic substances, like a homeopathic remedy, which is again something that Vogel was into during the later stages of his life. And I won't say it's just as easy as thinking, okay, I'm going to think of a strawberry milkshake, and I'm going to put this into a crystal, and then I'm just going to huff my breath, and it's going to be somewhere. Your consciousness has to be very highly tuned, and you have to have either some bit of the real strawberry substance on the crystal, or you have to be so good at collecting that information to your mind that you can entrain that into that through a thought and transmit that. But you can transmit smells to people. You can transmit the effects of having the strawberry milkshake, or however it may be, and then they make it that sensation in there, they make it that smell. But what we've been finding is that it will literally affect the body in similar ways. Like if you put like a mint in this thing, and then you mentally conceptualize their throat, and then you put the mint in there, it can help ease their throat or help numb it slightly, depending on your ability and how much, again, how much orgone energy is available in your body to process that intention to precipitate into their body.
Now, Jack, you also was on his website, humanigold.com, and you were looking at one of his bottles. What did you pick up?
Well, I did the same thing I was discussing. Is I was using the crystal to energetically scan to see what was in there, and it like if you have something in there and you say it's gold in there, I can conceptually see that there's gold in there, but it looks like it's almost like it's been exploded out, and it isn't in a it's in a paragaseous state. That's what I conceptually see it in this form. So
Yeah,
it does really look like it's in a state of being that's beyond the normal accepted way of seeing it.
It definitely is, because when you give that stuff to plants and animals, they respond incredibly to it, so they can sense it. We had one curious thing where we had a girl here at home has 7 cats, and she would put a couple of drops of Ormus in one of their water dishes and put it out in the room, whether it's on the piano or under the couch or wherever, and she'd put several out, but the one that had the Ormus in it always got finished first. Didn't matter where she put it. She just kind of was tickled by that, so she does it. She's been doing it for a few years now.
Oh, by the way, I have an update. I've been putting it in my water and been putting it in Ruby's water bowl, and the limp that she's got in her hind end is going away. She's not walking with much of a limp. So it's working. Yeah.
You've been using the spray too?
No, it didn't seem to respond well to her. And then she'd lick it off. It's like it was irritating to her. So I said, well, I'm just going to put some of the solution that's in the bottles you sent and put a few drops in her water, and she goes to town on it.
Yeah, animals know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like we had a lady that wanted some Ormus. They had an 800-pound horse. She'd had it 2 years. It would never come to her. It would come to her little 4-year-old niece. So what they did is put a teaspoonful of Ormus and a little handful of oats, and the horse came over and ate the oats out of her hand. The next day, obviously the little girl wasn't there, but when the lady went outside just carrying the Ormus bottle, the horse came over to her for the first time since she'd owned it. So animals know. I mean, they pick up on this. That same horse, by the time it had taken the Ormus for 3 or 4 days, its coat had gone from a dull brown to shiny, all on its own. And the horse also had a tumor on its neck that was about the size of my spread hand. And by the 3rd, 4th day, that was already shrinking quite quickly. So, I mean, animals know. We've got to pay a little bit more attention to them because they're much more tuned into this world than we are.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, we can learn a lot from them. The gal that wrote the Ormus book, Chris Emmons, she's a pharmacist, lives down in Florida. And she has a parrot. The parrot's name is Cricket. Mm-hmm. And this little parrot flies around in her house, and it will peck on whichever Ormus it wishes to have that day, and she'll get the little dropper out and give it a drop or two. And the first time we ever visited Chris, I mean, the parrot never knew us at all. We went there and we had, 6 different kinds of Ormus with her because we were taking some down for Chris as well. And then Chris showed us this thing. The parrot wanted, would go and pick its Ormus. And our bottles were all blue. All of Chris's bottles were, I think, foil wrapped glass or something like that. So we just had them sitting on the bench in the kitchen, and Chris told the parrot, go get some Ormus, and it ran over and it pecked on one of our bottles. So it knew it was there.
Wow.
It sensed the field. if you dowse, like I guess, using dowsing tools or Jack's crystals, you can actually dowse fields and energy strengths from this stuff. And Ricky uses her pendulum or dowsing rods. There's a lot of different methods, and we just gotta learn that we're a lot more than we think we are.
Dave, have you experimented with radioactive contaminated soil or water with this Ormus?
No, I haven't. There's a lot of experimentation was done here in Toronto back in the 90s with Brown's gas, which is monoatomic oxygen, Ormus oxygen, and monoatomic hydrogen, which is Ormus hydrogen. And that can be used to burn nuclear waste neutral within 2 minutes. And they had Yul Brown in Canada for 3 years building equipment, teaching people how to use it. The government was funding it, and they recorded all this information. And they actually did tests burning nuclear waste from the Pickering generating plant neutral within a couple of minutes. So what they're actually, Brown's gas works differently than we think it does. It's not like an oxyacetylene torch. What it does, it's a constant implosion drawing energy into the torch rather than out of it. And when you aim the torch with its flame, which is only 259 degrees Fahrenheit, it will excite whatever you push or whatever you aim the torch at. And somehow it excites that material up to a temperature which it seems to bond with probably the monoatomic hydrogen. And once enough of this is bonded with a beta-emitting material, it no longer emits the particle because it stabilizes. So it seems to be the way it works. And this has been around like 20 years now, And Yul Brown was working with radioactive waste material at least 10 years before he was in Toronto. So that's when he was in Australia. So this knowledge has been around,
So all this waste they've got stockpiled in Fukushima, they could render all this stuff neutral.
Probably. Probably. See, whenever you end up with waste product from a nuclear plant, you end up, all right, if they use like uranium rods and run a regular plant, the reason they have to take the rods out of service is because they become too intensely energized. So when a rod comes out of service, at that point it actually has the ability to produce 38 times more electricity than it did when it started. So it is now much more volatile.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, all around the world, they tried. In France, they actually put into service 4 nuclear reactors, which they called breeder reactors, which were designed to use that so-called spent but really energized fuel. And the thing was that it worked. I mean, it was a very, very Herculean technical task, but they got it going and working. But after you spend the second series of rods, your end product is plutonium. And what do you do with that?
Make bombs out of it.
It's the most highly toxic material there is. I mean, what is it? Like 1 ounce of plutonium spread through the atmosphere could kill 30 million people? So they ended up with these incredibly toxic materials from the breeder reactor, which, as you drew the power, sure, but you created this new substance, which then you had to deal with. So that's why they only use the rods once, and they're 38 times intensified when they're stored.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you end up with. You end up with a Pandora's box, and all you can do is open another box within that box, and God knows where you go after plutonium.
Right.
So these things, if they aren't stable, they will emit particles. Some of these things are like billions of years. So that's what they call the radioactive half-life. Now, if you could burn that with materials that will, unify with the beta-emitting material, you now have a stable material. I mean, we've come up with very odd things with the Ormus, and especially you can't find books on this. There's Chris Emmons' book now, and there's a book that Barry Carter kind of put together with 20 years of collecting material together about this. And that's it. So other than that, when you're trying to research areas where there's no information, you're left with your dowsing tools, your energetic field tools. And, I would propose the questions, and Ricky would do the dowsing, and based on the answers that she would get, we would proceed, and then eventually we'd end up getting cross-references and stuff which verified the direction we were going in. So, these focal tools, dowsing crystals, it doesn't matter what they are, they work. They absolutely work. And we just got to learn to trust them and trust ourselves a little bit.
Dave, if you could give us a bit of a resume, what has this been your? How long have you been? Are you trained in the sciences? Did you go to school to be an engineer in the science,
really.
or is this something you're self-taught?
Well, I did. I guess my earliest jobs, I started working as a mechanic. So you start solving problems.
Right.
And then I worked in aircraft for a while, and I worked in, all sorts of positions where problem solving was right up there. And I enjoyed it. So, that's why you stay at it. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the point where, in the case of vehicles, certain stuff would come into me that they couldn't find solutions for. I'd go through 3 or 4 more shops. And, it would get to me, and I just find them a challenge. So, it was kind of interesting to sort some of this stuff out, and some of it's sorted out in the most bizarre reasons you could ever imagine.
So you are the troubleshooter go-to guy.
Well, for some things, but it becomes a way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't accept always what's in the book, because what's in the book works 89% of the time, and the other 11% it doesn't. But you still got that problem, so you got to try and figure things out again. And then I worked for Douglas Aircraft for a while, the same sort of thing. And I think, here I'm going into this really brilliant leading edge industry. And I was there like 3 or 4 months, and I was writing up proposals that streamlined, the chemical milling department, which is where I worked, and, developed new cages, new ways to do for them to do their chemical cutting and number systems. And, it was just, and it wasn't difficult. That wasn't difficult at all. And I just did it because I liked it and I enjoyed it, it doesn't matter what there is. There's a better way to do whatever there is.
Oh, I'm always fascinated to speak with guys like this. My dad retired as a power engineer for the multiple telephone companies. The last one was AT&T. Mm-hmm. And he also got into whenever they would put in an office, like a switching office. This was back in the days when they were using mechanical relays, and then they switched over to solid state. He retired about the time when they were switching over to solid state equipment, computers. But oh man, he would go in and completely design, the format of an office. This architecture, the structure, rectifiers, transformers, even right down to the backup power equipment. I can remember the last thing that he was involved with was retrofitting all of these backup generators, the diesel generators, and they were starting to put in jet propulsion units, generators, using jet engines. They found they burn more efficiently, and they got a lot more power out of them. Yeah,
they do. They do quite a bit.
Yeah. And they're sticking a hell of a pretty good sized generator on the end of that thing to run all that equipment in these offices.
Yeah, and then they find anomalies when they work with things,
Mm-hmm.
And your answers are in the anomalies. You've heard of Bentley cars?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bentley in the First World War used to build aircraft engines. And, they were building their engines. They were putting out, 240 horsepower in 1915. And there was a little crack in one of the castings, which allowed a bit of oil to leak through. But they didn't see it. It was internal. But when they put that particular engine on the dynamometer, it had a 10% increase in horsepower. So they disassembled it, took it all apart, tried to figure out why, and they found that this oil that was leaking through this little crack and getting into somewhere else was relieving stress, and in doing so allowed the motor to produce 10% more horsepower. So all the engines they had in the factory, they disassembled all of them, took them apart, and drilled a hole exactly where that crack was, and increased the horsepower in all of the engines by 10%. You know, it's a
BMW is making aircraft
step at a time
engines
thing.
too.
Yeah, they made aircraft engines. Well, that's what their little symbol means. It's supposed to be the four little things of a propeller or something. You know.
Yep.
But you know, you learn, and it doesn't matter whether it's mechanical, electrically, spiritually, whatever. You learn, and you learn one step at a time.
Well, it's been one hell of a ride with Jack and Tobias, because they have just the amount of knowledge that these guys have increased, and working with them, my God, it's just, you know, in my opinion, what they're doing is taking medicine, the barbarianism of medicine out of it, and they're doing it through the use of using the tools of crystals in a non-evasive way.
Yeah, there's something we came across a while ago that might interest Jack. In Ontario here, there was just one day I saw this little white thing of quartzite at the side of the road. They have rock cuts here in Ontario. So I stopped, backed up, and pulled some of these stones out. Well, these stones, I mean, when you rub these stones together, they light up. And very, very noticeably. You know, it's amazing in a dark room, but even in the daylight, you can see these things. So when you rub them together, they light up. And the process is they call it triboluminescence. That's the word that they give to it. And they tell us that it's a piezoelectric effect. And that's it. That's where conventional science ends. Anyway, I was researching a lot of this stuff. And there was a gal named Linda M. Sweetie, who was a ethics lecturer and teacher at Towson University in Baltimore. And she got fascinated with this stuff. And she played with it as a hobby and did a lot of testing with this stuff for about 30 years. And it was interesting because she measured the actual light frequencies that would come from the stones when you rubbed them together. And that spread of light frequency was actually identical to the spread of light frequency of lightning. So is it possible that these stones can store lightning or generate lightning? Or is it possible that the electrical aspects of all of this stone literally has a light nervous system to it? Because I think all crystals are alive. And I think all stones are alive. They just have different lifespans than we do. And,
well, let's go to the movies. How many examples have we seen? Let's just talk about the Lord of the Rings. Gandalf and his staff. It's got a crystal at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
He's used this thing for a torch, amongst other things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, there's a lot of things. Well, it's like Jack was saying about the lasers and so on. I mean, crystals are alive. They grow. And things do not grow if they aren't alive. In the case of Ormus gold, the one thing that we found with that was if you assume something is alive, and if you assume something has consciousness, then you can look, because whatever that is, it will have an enemy in nature. Mm-hmm. And with the Ormus gold, we found that there's a bacteria called Firmicutes radiodurans that eats gold. Apparently there's a few others that do as well. And this bacteria got into the Fort Knox repository back in, I don't know, the 90s, I guess. So in their wisdom, they irradiated the gold, and they destroyed the bacteria Firmicutes radiodurans. They took it back to their lab, and its DNA was blasted to pieces. But the next day when they came in, the radiodurans had reassembled its DNA and was alive again. And we think what happened is that the Ormus gold carries the consciousness. That's why gold is important. It's got nothing to do with a metal. It's the Ormus gold. And that carried the consciousness back with the radiodurans, which supplied the ability for it to reorganize its DNA. So along that line, I think we talked some about that, I think, in the last time we
Yeah. Continue on with that. Take it further. You were saying that these gold veins regrow.
Yeah. Oh, well, gold grows. There's a fellow in Arizona that went out to his backyard. He had a lot of samples that he'd worked with inside for his lab, and getting too much, he stored outside. And he had occasion, I think it was 8 years later, to go out along the tarp on the side of the garage and pull in some of these original samples. And some of them he'd worked with very closely. And he thought that the flecks of gold in those samples looked bigger. So when he checked them with the photographs from 8 years before, they were bigger. So gold grows. This is why you get like nuggets and so on in rivers and creeks, because gold actually comes from pristine water, spring water, and then certain attributes of the atmosphere, the electromagnetics of the atmosphere, the combinations of light, I don't know exactly what, but it will cause the Ormus gold from the water to precipitate to the lower form of gold, which is the metal, and this will drop to the bottom of rivers. This is why gold generally occurs in veins, because they roll river bottoms. So these crystals will grow, and that's where you get your nuggets from, when these things continue to grow. So that was why we assumed that if something grows and has consciousness, which the gold appeared to do because of the Fort Knox thing, we decided to look, because if something grows and has consciousness, it's alive and it must have a natural enemy, and we found that in the Firmicutes radiodurans. So, I mean, we researched farther back on that. There was a guy back in the 30s named Galen Hieronymus, and he came up with the odd idea of putting a sheet of copper on the roof of his house and another one in his basement workshop and connecting the two with a wire. And on the one in the basement, he put seed trays, planted seedlings, and grew plants to fruition with chlorophyll, all in pitch black. So he did this for several years. He went in 1940, got a U.S. patent for something he called eloptic energy, which was electrical-optical, and they gave him the patent. And but anyway, what we think was actually happening is because it was copper there, and there's an ormic cloud in flux with any concentrated metal, and some of it, again, depending on the dynamics of the atmosphere, the surroundings, whatever, some of that's changing from ormic copper back to copper, and some from copper back to ormic copper. But we believe it's the ormic copper that activates the chlorophyll in plants. Now, the fact that we have sunlight may accentuate that. But if this is correct, the whole thought of photosynthesis is really a moot point. And rather than taking that as gospel, I think that should all be open to question. But anyway, go back 300 years from that, and you have the practice all through Europe and North America and various other parts of the world. A trade developed copper sheathing plows. And the reason was, when you plowed a field with a copper sheathed plow, you got 20 to 30% larger crops, healthier crops, better yields, better endurance and tolerance for cold and for whatever. And so as the copper wore, these little particles of copper got dropped off through the field as you were plowing, because, as I say, it was a trade. The copper coatings would wear off every few years, and you had to get them redone again. But the ormic cloud that accompanies the copper, we don't know whether it's 6 inches or a foot or 5 feet, but that cloud seems to be the thing that accentuated the plant growth. Or maybe if it worked in pitch black in the basement, maybe that's the only thing required for the plant growth, and the light's a secondary thing that may help to diffuse the copper. We don't know, because copper is worldwide; it's everywhere.
Right.
So it just seems to set up and kind of back up this possible behavior of these materials. And the Ormus form is the absolutely neutral form of anything. Like our inert gases are already in their ormic form because they have balanced valence bonding rings. So when any of the other materials are in their ormic form, they have kind of assumed these characteristics and are no longer chemically available for bonding. But in us, they work in a facilitation capacity. They allow things to happen. So I don't know. I mean, again, we don't know all the answers. We just keep looking, and it's fascinating, and there's just like more and more and more things keep, coming to bear.
Jack, you had a story about grinding you wanted to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was first trying to make my own Vogelcut crystal, I was taking some of the quartz, the random quartz crystals that you find, they'll drop the quartz crystals with a bunch of other kinds of pebbles and stuff, and they'll put that in your driveway. I mean, that's pretty normal. But I would take these things and I'd begin grinding on them. And that when I noticed I was grinding on them, it's one of those carbide wheels that you get on a bench grinder, 6-inch bench grinder. And as I ground on that, and I got a more flat surface on there, because these quartz crystals have a lot of internal cracks and stuff. It was just so interesting to me because I would keep doing it, and then I would start to notice that it was starting to glow on the inside. Every once in a while, there would be a flash of light. Of course, I looked it up later on, and so that is the triboluminescence there. But
I think there's more to it than that, though. Did you ever do that in the dark with lights out?
In the dark, yeah.
Yeah, the grinding.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more apparent than sometimes sparks will fly off of it too. So.
Yeah, and there's not supposed to be anything metal in there.
No.
Jack, Jack also has something else here. I want him to start talking about is the these chi generators.
I'll get to that here in a minute, but I'm not done yet.
Go ahead.
So, but this was the most interesting thing to me. I mean, it lighting up. I mean, that's cool. And yeah, there's more to be said to this, according to what modern mainstream idealisms are. But as I would do this, because they said the silica is not a good conductor of heat, so I would periodically take that and put it into the water. But there were times when I didn't do that, and I kept doing it and kept doing it for maybe about 30 minutes. And then the next time I put it on the wheel and I gave it a little push against that wheel, and the thing shocked me. It shocked me so much that my hand just flinched all the way backwards from it, and it went into the grinding wheel, and it rolled around there a couple times and shot back towards me.
Oh, wow.
But that only happened when I failed to dip it in water. And another curious thing is if I have a quartz crystal, even if I'm doing it on a whetstone, it seems to dehydrate my body. And I need to drink a lot more water when I'm doing that. I mean that would make some sense when you're doing it on a whetstone because it takes some energy to move it back and forth. But when you're just holding it against a grinding wheel and you start getting really dehydrated, it doesn't make as much sense to me.
Really? Wouldn't it be interesting to film all that with a Crystalline camera?
Well, it's a simple enough procedure.
Moving, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was on a silica carbide wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was reacting to the silica. I don't.
Silica is a very curious material as well because it's transmutable. I mean, the first time they found out was in 1740 in North Africa because they had chickens there that were laying calcium shells with no source of calcium intake. And they were actually transmuting silica from the sand into calcium. So any element, well, they've known this for a long time. See, the Firmicutes radiodurans would eat the gold, and they would and it would crap something farther down the periodic table and obviously extract its energy from the difference. I mean, we do the same thing with our food. When we dissolve it in the stomach acid, and then whenever it passes to the small intestine, the liver injects pH 10 plus material from the duodenum, and now you have that acid-alkali reaction, just like you had with the rain and the forest ash, and that's what releases our iron and our magnesium and our copper into their ormic white powder forms, which is the biologically absorbable stuff, which is chemically neutral, because metals are toxic to us, but we convert them if our system's working properly. And all it's doing is the same acid-alkali reaction that we do using lye to precipitate it out of the salts or the rain and the ash. You can also extract Ormus if you're in a cold area. You can extract it from water. They call it fractional freezing. So you have a 5-gallon pail of, good water, and as it freezes outdoors, you just keep taking the clear ice off the top, and by the time you get down to the bottom inch, you've got this stuff looks like milk. So you've extracted all the ormic material naturally because it migrates out of ice as it freezes. That's why if you look at an ice cube in your fridge, it's got a white center, because artificial refrigeration freezes it from the outside in, and it migrates into the center, and then it's got nowhere to go. That's what the white is in the middle of your ice cube.
Oh, for cracking out loud.
All natural freezing occurs from the top down. So this is how it works. That's why you have such an enormous food supply at the poles, because the Ormus migrates out of the ice, and at the bottom of the ice you've got a super rich nutrient level. At the top of the water, just below the ice, and that's where the ice worms grow, the protozoa, the plankton, the zooplankton, all that stuff that feeds the krill. And the krill is like the largest animal biomass on the planet. And then it eventually goes out and feeds everything else. And it's all coming from the ice at the poles. Yet scientifically we're told everything happens faster at warmer temperatures. Not the case. All the food supply works at the cold temperatures because of the concentration of the ormic material by natural freezing. And that's, we talked about that, I think, before too. But as I was saying to you earlier, there was a cryon channeling that Ricky just sent me back today. He did it on the 1st of March, and it's on the net if anybody wants to listen to it. It's the March 1st cryon channeling. It's 20 minutes long. Cryon channels, I don't know, somebody from the Pleiades or something like that. He's been around a long time. But he specifically talks about this stuff. And he's the first one I've ever heard talk about this stuff other than me. And he explains it from a completely different point of view, because I don't think he's ever heard of Ormus. But he explains what's happening, and that it's a food source, and it's going to regenerate the oceans and the fish and the reefs. And this is a natural cycle that's going on right now. So anyway, it's 21 minutes if anybody wants to listen.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out.
It sure surprised the heck out of me, because I've never heard anything like that coming back from anybody else. I felt like I'm all by myself.
Jack and Tobias also have some unique knowledge too about history, and I don't know, Jack, do you feel like talking about some of that with the Anu technology?
Well, I can give my understanding and how I think it's parlaying with some of the topics that have been brought forth today. Like what you're talking about with the gold. It's like, well, why do they call it a gold vein? Because a vein is where the blood flows through, and that enriches our bodies. And of course, if it's alive, then if you actually have a vein in there and it begins growing, because something I even understand from a lot of the people that do talk on the Anunnaki is it talked about the Anu coming in, and they would literally seed gold in certain mountains and hills, and then they'd wait a while, and then they'd come back, and then they'd pick it all up, and then they would take it away to do whatever it is they do with it. So they would literally come down here, seed it, just like you would grow a crop, and then take it back. Because people don't normally conceptualize, okay, well, we have a crop of, corn, and, they understand that. But they seed gold or a mineral, and it grows, and they take it back.
Yeah, you just made a couple of connections for me there, if I could mention it. One of the things that puzzled me, they talk about the Anunnaki altering our DNA to create a mining population. I wondered about that for a little bit too, but the Anunnaki apparently have extremely long life cycles. So if they had a 1,000-year life cycle, they likely wouldn't be breeding until the female was 200 years old, because all of the life cycles seem to be proportional to the lifespan of whatever the creature is, here or there, I guess. That's why they would never had enough population to do their own mining. That said, the pictures that this fella had over 8 years showing the gold crystals growing sort of makes sense, that if you have 1,000-year lifespans, you might as well just plant the seeds, and even if it did take 100 or 200 years, it didn't seem to make all that much difference to them.
There
because,
you go.
Proportionally, it would work out to our lifetime of, 10 years. So yeah, it makes sense. That's
Well, they do make lab-grown crystals. I wonder if they can do this with gold, Jack.
Well, I don't see why you couldn't. You would just have to understand what kind of atmosphere to put it into, because if it can grow out in nature in a certain way, there's usually a better way of doing it into a made-up laboratory. It just depends on what you consider to be the laboratory and what you consider to be nature, and how to curtail the energies flowing through it to make it grow correctly. So
these guys work a lot with lab-grown crystals. They're able to. It's because of the memory. There isn't a long span of memory of information, that's taken over thousands of years to grow. And under the conditions that they grow, they're their own lapistry too. I think Jack, Tobias has more of the equipment, I think, now. Yeah, he could grind, but to cut
Tobias
crystals.
is a lapidarist.
Yeah.
So he cuts crystals and sells them and makes jewelry with them.
I hope he saves all of his little grindings. I wouldn't mind getting some little packages of grindings, and I could do the Ormic process on them and extract it out of the... it sure saves us a lot of banging and smashing crystals down with a mortise,
Well, we'll have to get you have to introduce you to him. He's on holiday right now. Kind of a working holiday with he's taking care of some family affairs in BC. But he'll be back, what is it, Tuesday? Yeah, he'll be back home Tuesday. Yeah.
Now, here, this is interesting. It's like the other, they're talking about the Anu and the gold. They're saying that they're using it for the atmosphere, which I'm sure they are. But my understanding is they use gold for pretty much everything that they do, along with silver and other metals. But those are the two main things, is copper. Well, not copper. Well, they use copper too, but they use gold and silver. And one of the things that they would do with the gold, they were talking about, and that's a tradition that goes back to Egypt, is that they would consume gold in a certain way for their health. And that's what made them live so long and be so strong energetically and physically. But another thing that I know from my understanding is that they had a way, because they talk about them genetically altering different species to do certain things. They also incorporated the same things to themselves, and they would find a way to make a gold apparatus that was inside of their hands and their arms and the rest of their body, and they would actually just like you're saying with gold veins. I mean, this was literal for them because they would make all these little gold filaments, gold and silver throughout their bodies, and it would pretty much run along where the lymphatic system was throughout their bodies, in parallel to the major meridians.
Is this stuff from Sitchin's writings, or?
No, I mean I'm telling you from my understanding.
Yeah.
But you can consider it for yourself.
Yeah. You just hit another nerve there too. About 20 years ago, there was a guy in Barry Carter's friend. I believe he was in Oregon, and I only know him as Jim. I don't know his last name. But the two of them were working on a project in eastern Oregon, and what they were trying to do was to take water that was running off from old mining waste, because it was, it had a lot of minerals and it was toxic. And he built a very good ozone generating machine. And what they were going to do was run some of this water through an overhead pipe and then down into something that looked more or less like a water heater without a skin, and it just had rows of trays, almost like a dehydrator. So what he did, he was bubbling ozone into the water where it was going into the pipe, and then this was going through the pipe and coming out on top of the charcoal. So they did this for 2 or 3 days, and then they thought, well, what we're going to do, let's see. So they took one of the charcoal briquettes, and they smashed it with a hammer, and it had gold fibers in it. And at that point, they wondered, well, let's just be quiet about this and let's see what's what. And they tried a few more, and they had gold fibers in them. So they let it run a little bit longer, and then I guess 5 or 6 days in, the pipe started to leak. There was a neoprene joint in the pipe, and it was a plastic pipe. So Jim got up on a plastic bucket, and he thought if he can give the pipe a little twist and seal it up, then he'll do it for the end of the day, put a new seal in it. But anyway, what he did, he got up on the bucket, and he put both hands on the pipe, and he got a series of shocks, like electric shocks. He was not grounded, and it knocked him down onto the ground. When he got up off the ground and made a fist, gold threads come out of the back of his hand at every finger. And when he did it with the other hand, he got the same thing. Gold threads come out of the backs of both of his hands. Anyway, they took him to the hospital because they figured, this isn't good. They did their tests at the hospital, and they told him to get his affairs in order. He had a 3 times lethal dose of lead and a 3 times lethal dose of arsenic.
Wow.
Or 4 times, sorry. One was 3 and one was 4. And so they took him home. He got very, very sick. Barry started hitting research. He had an aunt or something that had a health store in Oregon, I believe. So he talked to her, and she suggested administrating 35% peroxide in very small amounts to start trying to clean this up and oxidize his system. The doctors had told him he had a couple of weeks to live and get all of his stuff in order. They started administering the peroxide, and Jim was very, very sick. And odd things started to happen. He started to grow, looked like little plasticized sort of crystals from the edges of his eyes, from under his fingernails, his toenails. When he went into the bathroom, he would have sometimes like 16-inch sparks shooting from his feet to the toilet mounting bolts.
Whoa.
I mean, this was really weird stuff. And all this while, he's at the point he's sleeping about 22 hours a day. But they kept administering the peroxide, and slowly over time he got a little bit better, and he didn't die. Jim's still alive today. He backed completely away from this whole thing for 5 or 6 years because it just scared the dickens out of him. But this is what happened, and just after he was starting to get back together, like these fibers and all this weird stuff would keep coming out of him, And he bought a car. He bought a new Cavalier back then. And he only had the Cavalier like for a few days. And what happened is around the edges of the windshield, it started to fog up. Like just around the edge, like the half-inch around the edge of the whole windshield. That started to fog up. And if you'd be out in the car for an hour, that fog from the edge kept growing farther and farther out onto the windshield. And after 2 or 3 days, there was gold fibers coming out of his ass into the front seat of the car.
What?
And, yeah. So it looked like his body was like shedding a lot of this stuff using the peroxide.
Yeah.
But anyway, this went on for a while, and then it got to the point where he couldn't even drive the car because he would get in the car, and within 10 minutes or so, this frosting would just grow right out into the center of the windshield. He couldn't even see through it. So he phoned GM, and they sent a guy out. He said, well, I can't drive the car. I can't see out of the window. Phoned GM. The car was only a few months old, if that. They sent a guy out, and the guy got in the car, and the first thing he sat down on, he got all these gold wires in his ass from the front seat. And all of this crap on the windshield. You couldn't scrape it off. You couldn't rub it off. You couldn't do anything. And then this guy was pulling these wires out of his arse. So what they did, he phoned GM, and they sent a big flatbed out with a giant bag, and they put the entire car in the bag on the back of the truck, took it away, and gave him a new car. So who knows whatever happened to that car.
Okay, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
Has the guy been shitting gold nuggets?
Just wires. I guess he spent 20 years pulling his wires.
Wow.
So, I mean, who are you going to tell these things to? People don't believe them. Barry knew. He was his friend, and they worked through a lot of this. And eventually Jim got back and started doing a bit more playing around with the Ormus. And at one point, he was... They had made water that was rich in Ormus, and he was working in a garage. A buddy of his was away a couple of weeks. He had, one of those pickup truck work trucks with the toolboxes on the back and so on. And he was playing around with the Ormus, and they found that they could make it move around on the floor. And if they turned on a generator and it was generating pulses, or a welding machine or something he was playing around with, he could just bring something close, and the Ormus, like a little puddle of water on the concrete floor, it would move away. Like it would literally flow away from the source of the magnetic field. Wow. So they played around with that a little bit. And a couple of weeks later, his buddy comes back, and he's going to go to work, hops in the truck, and it won't start. So Jim's a bit of a mechanic anyway, so they found it was getting no fuel. So they took the fuel pump off, and it was full of this yellow jelly with gold flecks in it. So they took off the line, they went back, they took it right back, and they dropped the whole gas tank. And the gas tank was full of about 14 gallons of yellow jelly with gold flecks in it. So it looks like what they think has happened is the pulse field on the ormic material repelled it. And the ormic material, trying to get away from it, found solace in the only organic substance it could get to, which was the gasoline in the truck. And it just literally migrated right through the tank, the lines and everything, and just took refuge as this like yellow jelly with these little gold flecks in it. So the gold flecks would show that some of it had been transferred from the ormic form back into the physical gold form.
Oh, that's amazing.
I know. I mean, we thought, wow, what a really weird story. 7 years ago, we shipped some Ormus down to New York City, and we weren't labeling it with "Do Not Irradiate" stickers at the time. That came later because of this. Mm-hmm. But we sent Ormus to Brooklyn first time, and the girl phoned. The bottle was blown off the bottom, or the bottom came off the bottle, and there was like this sandy-colored, gold-colored residue in it. And so she sent us pictures and actually ended up sending the package back to us. I replaced it, and the second package arrived the same way. And at the same time, we didn't know about shipping by air, so I had shipped 2 bottles by surface mail to Finland, and they got there about 8 weeks later, and the same thing had occurred to those. And we got pictures from all of them. And what appears to have happened is in New York, they had put in what they called a level 2 metal penetrating X-ray system for the mail. I guess because of 9/11 and the UN, and they were mailing each other, anthrax and ricin and all that for a while.
Yeah.
So because our bottles were wrapped in foil, they couldn't see through it with a regular scanner. It went to level 2. And whatever the frequency was at that level 2 machine, it caused the Ormus to flash back into physical gold, which explains the gold on the aluminum foil that was wrapping it in the sandy residue, because the Ormic material is just as fluffy and white as a cloud. So they caused this to flash back. So you just got to dig up the frequency that they used there, and you should be able to change Ormus material that you can make from anything, water, seawater, salt, back into physical gold, if that's what you want to do.
Okay, now.
So, but physical gold has no importance, only to, greedy people.
Yeah.
It's the Ormus gold, it's the material of life.
Well, it definitely is.
Jesus.
Yeah.
This is what they gave Jesus when he was born: frankincense, myrrh, and gold. They didn't give him a gold brick. They gave him the gold of enlightenment for what he had to do. It's in the Bible. Moses went up the mount to collect the tablets. The Israelites collected their gold. They fashioned a golden calf. Exodus 32, verse 20 says exactly, Moses smashed the calf. He burned the calf to a powder. He put the powder on the water and made the Israelites drink it. He made Ormus gold from the gold. He was raised by the Egyptian royals. The Egyptian royals and the priests made Ormus. They called it showbread back then.
Yeah.
There's even a hieroglyph for that stuff on Lawrence Gardner's video, That's on our website, too, if you want to link into some of that stuff.
Mm.
So, all this stuff is connected. We just keep learning more puzzle pieces,
Right.
But, and as I say, crystals are alive. All crystals contain hydrogen and water and oxygen, so they have water. Water has memory.
Oh, yeah.
That big crystal you sent me, Ricky has it built into this interesting little cuff. And she has it sitting under a pyramid that's about 2 feet high.
Oh.
And everybody that comes to our house now, if they put their hand into the pyramid, 7 or 8 inches above that quartz crystal that you sent us,
Mm-hmm.
they can all feel the energy. Everybody can.
Wow.
So I'll have to send you a picture of it. She made
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah, I got that up there in Mount Shasta when I was up there.
You did? Wow.
I think that's where I got it from, yeah.
Well, now it's in Mount Ricky.
Jack has experience with a device called a cheat machine generator.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one too. Jack, you want to talk about that?
Oh, sure. It's an orgone energy generator. It's made by Carl Wells. And if you go to his website, he even has a course he calls Magic of the Future. And in the course, he explains how this machine that you plug into a wall can generate the same kind of orgone energy that they would use in sacrificial systems, except without having to sacrifice animals, so it's far more humane and everyone's happy. So you can take this chi machine and plug it in, and you put water on it, and it will change the surface tension of the water. It will change the taste of the water. A lot of people say that they feel they have more energy, just like you're saying with the animals and the Ormus. If you charge water with the orgone generator, and then you put that out, animals go to that first. Chickens will, cats will, it doesn't matter, dogs will. They just like it more, and I use it all the time, and I like the food a lot better. It seems to have, they have all kinds of artificial, imitation banana, imitation apple flavorings. When you put that on an orgone generator, if it has artificial flavors, it kind of tunes them out a little bit. It has a way of kind of nullifying any kind of flavor that's not natural. And that's something I've learned through personal practice. but I mean, if you have an apple and you put that on there, it tastes a lot more like a, even if it's a genetically modified apple, you put it on there, after maybe 10 minutes, you take a bite of it, it tastes a little bit more like a natural grown apple. And
there's a lady that makes what they call chi cards somewhere in California, and friend of Gary Young's. We got one of those a number of years ago because she said if you keep it in your fridge, all your vegetables and stuff will last a lot longer.
Yeah, it does.
So, yeah, so we got one, and Ricky uses it in the fridge, and I mean, you can put stuff in there, it's just fine in a month. I couldn't believe it. I mean, normally stuff's getting kind of ratty by a couple of weeks, right? But this stuff, clean, fresh, nice. So these things work. I mean, all this stuff works. Don't know exactly how, but it sure works. And I don't know. We've got to learn more about this. It's our intent that directs a lot of these things.
Well, I got some good news. Our friend Tobias is available. I'm going to drag him into the call right now.
Well, that sounds good.
Tobias.
Hi, Dale.
Hey, welcome, man. We were just talking, Jack was just talking about chi machines, and we got Dave Kane on, so welcome. Welcome aboard, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you're from, Dave's from Ontario, St. Petersburg, right?
Peterborough, yeah.
Peterborough, and he's from Winnipeg. He's currently over with his family in, whereabouts again?
I'm in Vernon right now.
Okay.
In BC, yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to continue on. Just, feel free to speak up, pipe in. We've been talking about a lot of stuff tonight. Ormus and talking about gold, and you're going to have to listen to the archive for the first half, man, to really
definitely
get a sense of it. Yeah. So, so go ahead, Dave. I'm gonna just let you go ahead and continue, and we'll pick it up from here.
I forget where I was talking about. What I was talking about there for a few minutes.
Well, I can discuss more about the chi generator.
Oh yeah.
When we do effects with our crystals, let's say we have the crystal and we're tuning into a person, and like something that we like to use is the kava kava. It's a powdered root, and when people take this, it has a numbing effect on their body and their nervous system. It makes them feel good, and if they get enough of it, it has an effect similar to being intoxicated from alcohol. So, without the hangover. So it's wonderful stuff.
Yeah, so sounds like a good way to spend the weekend.
Yeah, it is. And when you do it with the crystal, you don't have to physically ingest any of it. So it's really interesting, the effects that take place. But anyway, when we tune the same thing into the chi generator, we like to tune in through a crystal, a faceted crystal, with the intention of the kava kava, or just put the kava kava, root on top of the chi generator. And if you can tune into that chi generator along with the crystal, and you're working on someone, if you allow time for that orgone energy field to develop and you use it on someone, the effects are 3 to 4 times more powerful than just mentally conceiving of the kava or putting it on the crystal and using it yourself. And what we've learned is when we tune into someone and we try and create like either energetic or physical, because we can't, again, we don't really have the laboratory to do that, but we can see it conceptually, and it has the same real results on people, is that if we just do it of our own body, it seems to deplete our own body of the orgone energy, and then we become very tired and fatigued. But if we use the chi generator along with us, not only is there an added power, especially if the chi generator is attuned to the same substance or frequency that we're trying to put into a person's body, it's a lot more effectual, and then we don't end up being tired if the generator is powerful enough for the operation.
One of the things that Ricky's more tuned into the whole spiritual side of things than I am. She's been at it for a long time. She's been dowsing for over 50 years. Before she ever even heard of the word dowsing, she was doing all this stuff. And she has, I wish she was here right now, but she has a lot of interesting information on this. When you're working with something, regardless of what it is, if you put into your mind that you are simply the conduit, then you will pass the energy through you without ever depleting yourself. And all you have to do is think that that's it. And then you become the conduit. Because a lot of people that do healing, and she does like Reiki and all sorts of this stuff, you become the conduit through which the energy travels, and you do not deplete your own energy at all. And it's simply, you just mentally, state that to yourself, and that's the way it is. And it works that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be something that you should give it a try. And because the point of healing is not to deplete oneself. It's simply to allow the healing to proceed on its own. You know? But I think Dale will get Ricky on there some night, because she's
oh yeah, definitely
really interesting, and she's got such an extensive, comprehensive knowledge of this stuff. And I mean, she's had weird things happen to her. I guess I'm one of them, but But when you're healing, always become the conduit.
Tobias, we've already discussed what Jack and you do as far as healings using crystals, and the fact that you two also have this ability to remote view into people's bodies, and Tobias is one that can actually see streams of data. Good example of this was a movie called Lucy that was just out here not too long ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
And Tobias, you want to take that further as to your ability with this and how you use this with when you're working together with Jack, healing with your chi generators and your crystals. He's got a chi generator that I call it like a mini CERN device, man. He's got his own portal. He's got quite a generator.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when Jack and I do the things that we do, I mean, like you said, it's just remote viewing, but I guess really each time can be slightly different. There's different sort of ways of getting information and different things you see. It just depends on the moment, but the information, it's incredible. I mean, you said data and stuff. Yeah, data comes different ways sometimes, but I think for the most part, what we're doing is literally just looking. We're looking at things. It's like looking at something with your eyes. It's like you're going through things. It just happens to be the people's bodies and organs and different things like that. We look where we look, and on top of what we see visually, there's definitely data and information that comes through as well. So it's a big process that involves, differences each time it's done, really, and similarities. So.
You guys ever use radionics machines?
Well, I think a chi machine is a radionics machine, isn't it, Jack?
Well, yes and no. I mean, if you go to the site, you buy. There's a clear difference between a chi generator, because it's just supposed to generate chi. Then you have other ones that they have dials on them so that you can set them to different radio frequencies as a radionic device. The one that you have is called the Rad 5000, and it's got all the dials on there. Each one of those dials is like tuning into a different radio station, and it emits a signal. So it is a radionics device, the one that you have.
There's like when I met Ricky about 9 years ago, she had radionics machines, and that was the first time I was ever introduced to them. I'd never heard of them. and she had wells in there for, collecting, and then various samples of water bottles to store certain energies and transmit and project certain energies and so on. Anyway, there's a little device out now, if you look it up, if it's helpful to you at all. It's called a Spooky 2, the number 2, Spooky number 2, and they're made in China. They're a very sophisticated little machine, and there's a fella in New Zealand that does all of the software for them, and they run on your computer. It's a Radionics device. The thing that's really amazing is you can buy their fanciest one for about $180, and they have software updates online and everything, and that's all provided free, and it's just a group of people that have gotten together to produce these things to try and make them as available as possibly can be. So that might be, a tool that you might want to have a look at too. So, or anybody that's listening too. The Spooky 2. Good name, I guess. Yeah. But we got one. We've been trying it out, and it's quite an impressive little device. And it just runs off your PC. Your program and software goes in your PC, and then this thing will emit whatever frequencies you require it to emit. And then all the software runs it over cycles and this and that, and you can run it all day or all night if you're working with anything, plants, people, doesn't matter.
So is it actually generating? Is it actually generating energy, or is it just a frequency, or?
Yeah, it's generating frequencies, and the software is all in there with like hundreds and hundreds of all of the right frequencies that they've been, sorting out. They've collected and sorted out a lot of this stuff over quite a long period of time. You can get information on the website. I've heard of the guy in New Zealand that's been doing this. I think he's been doing it for most of his life. I just can't remember his name right now. But it's worth a look-see. It's an interesting tool.
Dave, Tobias also is one that has quite a bit of knowledge about the Anunnaki. Him and Jack both have get quite a bit of knowledge about this. It's kind of one thing that kind of separates them from a lot of people that have studied. They have this unique abilities that they tapping into a lot of old technology, very ancient technologies as well. I mean, geez, these guys, they're beyond, I think, astral traveling, but it's not uncommon for them to tap into a lot of this. And, all these people that are talking about Anunnaki, and there's a woman that claims that she's an Earth human ambassador for the Anunnaki. We've talked about her before, and it's apparent that a lot of these people, I think, are just showboating quite a bit. And Jack and Tobias they know they're Anu. And, you got any questions you like to ask Tobias? Because I know that Jack was hitting a lot of memory nerves with you, Dave.
Well, yeah, I mean,
there.
When you get talking about this thing, you start to make little connections and, little cross references, and everything's just another step forward, And again, I mean, there's a billion ways to God, and it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. If you do your best and you do it with good intent for the most benevolent outcome, we have found that anything you do or pursue, as you require, all these steps everything will be presented to you in the way that you can deal with it. And I mean, with Ricky and I, this has been the process for 8 years now.
Amen.
You're
I
not
like
driving,
that.
Well, you're not driving the bus.
Yep.
Enjoy the ride, because it's amazing. And all paths go to the same place eventually.
Yeah.
And just enjoy the collecting process on the way, because it's wonderful stuff.
Oh yes, it is. Very in deep. I've been throwing a lot of my attention into the Bible as an artifact, as a history, some of the stories. And Dave, it's like a lot of this stuff is just coming to me without really even paying much attention. But I feel I've reached a point now where it's like I've got the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And
well, there's an old saying: when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Well, that's the case
we're
here.
all surrounded by teachers. We just gotta look.
Yes. And that's why I just felt this urge. It's like, gosh, I gotta get you three together, because I really think we all have something in common. And yeah, we recognize that humanity is really getting, it's at a crossroads.
It's waking up.
Yeah.
I mean, just with us through our Ormus thing, I'm on the phone all day, every day, and we're talking to people all over Canada, the United States, all over the world, and then emails and stuff are coming in, and people are waking up everywhere. People care. People really do give a damn for everything in the planet and all the rest of it. And it's the people that are waking up that's going to eventually turn the whole thing over and start to reintroduce the integrity that we need to have. That's probably the intent of the original people, was the integrity, but it's been usurped. So, it's time to go back and do things the right way. And we have to do it all one by one. And but it's happening. It is happening. We see it all over the place.
Bring Tobias up to speed a little bit, if you would, here about the Ormus and what it does to just our plant foods and plants in general. You get you have the photograph there of the walnut.
Oh yeah, well that was in the walnuts are in Barry Carter's place in Eastern Oregon. And so what there's a mother tree, which is I don't know how many years old, the daughter tree, which was grown from a walnut from the mother, and that tree in the pictures was Ormused once per year for 4 years. And as of the 4th year, there's the picture with 2 golf balls, 2 walnuts from the mother tree, which are about 30% smaller than the golf balls, and 2 walnuts from the daughter tree, which are probably about 75% larger than the golf balls. Plus, the daughter tree had a yield of 6 times what the mother tree had. So it really enhances the yield of plants, the health of plants, the visual appearance of plants. One of our videos, I've got some pictures up there showing morning glory flowers that we grew at home. We simply soaked the seeds overnight on the blue ones and not on the purple ones, and the blue flowers are all over 4 inches each, and the purple ones are like what you're used to, about maybe 2 1/4 inches for a morning glory flower. And the really curious thing about that is the following year, both plants grew back with 1-inch white flowers, and that is essentially the original morning glory plant. So it looks like the Ormus gold allowed the genetic reprofiling of the plant back to its original appearance. So, we see this too, like on skin cancers, right? Because they're easy, they're obvious, they're easy to see. And when you put Ormus on these things, they'll fall off in about, we tell people about 2 to 10 days. I've actually seen them fall off in 36 hours, but, some people need a little more time. So what it does, the Ormus gold is a superconductive material. It forms a Meissner field around the DNA, and the electrical activity within the DNA has been measured, and it increases up over 1 million times normal. And it's completely shielded because of the superconductive Meissner field, and it seems to have the ability to reorganize itself back to its original protocol and then produce the correct material from that point on, rather than the deviant material it was, producing in its damaged condition. So it just simply heals up underneath, and the tumors fall off. So I mean, I think that's exactly what's happening in the plants as well. So
Now,
we're going to try this year and get some Ormus on some GMO corn and stuff, and see if we can harvest completely viable seed heads.
I'd be really interested to see what this does with, the effects of chemtrails, all those heavy metals and barium they're putting in the atmosphere and falling to Earth.
Yeah, well, that's another problem. I don't know that stuff is altering the DNA like Monsanto is. I mean, they're deliberately altering it, to come up with some kind of a characteristic. Like, where do you draw the line on these people? The next thing they're going to be putting a centipede gene in a chicken so that it can grow 50 legs,
That would
do with these guys?
Well,
so
yeah.
So that it can walk on quicksand, yeah. I'm interested in what you were just talking about with the Ormus and cancer, skin cancer, for example. So is it taking the information from the cells of the DNA and rebuilding it based on a blueprint? Or is there another component?
What it seems to do, it produces a Meissner field, which is a conductive field around the telomeres in the DNA. When the superconductive field is in place, that interrupts all other electrical, magnetic, and electromagnetic frequencies from having an influence on that particular DNA strand. Within that protective shell of the Meissner field, it's like a little bubble around the DNA. The DNA, then, because it's lost the external influences, it is no longer maintained by outside frequencies, and it reorients itself back to its original design protocol. That seems to be what's happening. It seems to be what's happening with the plants as well. So it's interesting stuff to watch. I had a lady call me this morning. She's out. Where is she now? She's in Oregon, I think. Yeah, 503 number. I think she's in Oregon. Anyway, she's been taking Ormus. We sent some out to her, and I guess she's been taking it about 3 weeks. And she's noticed some interesting things. And the main thing that she's noticed that she's very happy about, she's had a benign tumor on her chest above her breasts, and it's disappearing. And that's only in 3 weeks.
Oh.
And then lots of other little things, Ormic materials, in a lot of ways, are like water. When you have multiple symptoms of dehydration from lack of water, you can either treat the symptoms or you can rehydrate. And when you rehydrate, all these 100 symptoms will disappear. The Ormic materials are critical for our internal messaging system because they are superconductive, but they are also chemically neutral. And they compose literally the telephone poles of our internal communication system. So they're not utilized by the system because they're chemically neutral, but they facilitate it. It's like the telephone poles holding up our external communications. If they weren't there, it wouldn't work because the wires are lying on the ground, but they're not consumed by the system. So the Ormic materials seem to be necessary for that. Once our messaging system is working properly, it's like a 12-volt battery in your car. As soon as the voltage drops below, there's a myriad of repercussions. As soon as you put the new battery, everything's back to normal. So that's all. When you're introducing these Ormic materials, it brings our system back to normal, because the one thing about Ormic materials is they are anti-magnetic. And look what we're doing to ourselves with electromagnetic fields today. And that's causing us to lose Ormic materials. Depleted fields are causing us to ingest less and less of these materials. So some of the things you see with Ormus, like we see this all the time. When we do our talks, we'll have 40, 50, 100 people. We start passing around this Ormus. It's mixed half and half with magnesium oil. The magnesium oil allows the Ormus to soak in very, very quickly, and the Ormic material sort of reintroduces the hard drive back to the body while the magnesium looks after another shortage. And magnesium oil is simply evaporation concentrated seawater, So everything in it is in the ratios that the human body requires, because we are seawater creatures. So once this is introduced, we watch things like sore backs, L4-5 problems, sore necks, headaches. We've seen people wipe this stuff, just spray it on your hand, wipe it across your forehead, temple to temple, and we've watched day-long headaches disappear sometimes before they can bring.
You know what? I got to do that. I've had some headache issues going on this week, and I got that spray. I'm gonna use that for that.
Have you got your bottle beside you?
No, it's out in the kitchen because that's the only place, and it's up high in a cupboard right now because I don't have a tin yet.
Dale, if you put that on your head right now, your headache is going to be gone within 2 minutes.
Oh, I don't have one right now.
Oh.
But I don't know what's been going on, but I have it out there. I got to get myself a metal tin to keep this in here, but there's a lot of electronics in my bedroom. And I wanted to keep it, like you said, away.
Second-hand store. Go to a second-hand store and pick up a cake tin or a biscuit tin or something like that.
Yeah.
Or even a metal pot with a metal lid. That'll work too. Or a metal filing cabinet will work too. It just, between leaving the aluminum on it and the steel container, you've got a double Faraday shield, which will reflect pretty well all frequencies, and then the material's fine.
All right.
It won't disaggregate.
You might want to send some of your Ormus to these guys, because I think that would definitely be interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to check this stuff out. I mean, it's absolutely it does everything that we say it does. Or if you get a chance, watch our videos just a little bit there and get a handle on it. And I'm sure there's a lot of places that kind of, well, I tell people, once we start to see the world through Ormus, and we've been working with it for 8 years now, it starts to explain a lot of other things, and it cross-indexes with everything, and literally including the crystals and the fabric of this Earth. You know, this Earth's alive.
Yeah, I'd be interested in doing an analysis on it.
Yeah, and it's all part of it. You know, we think that Ormus gold may be actual consciousness itself. And like I mentioned about that, the gold supply in the Firmicutes radiodurans, we were looking for other ways in nature where we might have that acid-alkali reaction. And so Ricky was researching some stuff. And, you know, when she gets close to things, like all of a sudden, her guides will talk to her. And she'll come up with stuff like you couldn't possibly imagine. So anyway, she's researching all this, and she found that male sperm is very alkaline. The female vagina is very acidic. And then she's just sitting there in her chair, like for a couple of minutes. And she turns and she says, I know what's happening. She said, during copulation, Ormus gold is released from the mucous membrane of the vagina, and that allows the consciousness to be physically present when the sperm and the egg unite, and that is life.
Whoa.
Right? And bang, it just was all handed to her right like that. And you know, this happened a couple of years ago, and I still haven't been able to find anything that comes anywhere close to disputing that. Because what's the difference between life and non-life? Consciousness. You know,
well, yeah.
When people die, on the moment of death, 21 grams, 3/4 of an ounce disappears on the moment of death. Doesn't matter whether it's a child or an adult. So something's left the body. And there's actually a few people now have picked up videos of just this little vapor that leaves the body. There was an interesting one there where a mouse was caught in a trap. Someone was filming it. And I guess they're using these digital cameras and stuff. And just as the mouse stopped moving, this little vapor trail just moved up out of the mouse.
Ormus, the Ormic consciousness.
The consciousness left. See, and the other side, if you think of Ormus gold as possibly being consciousness itself, it is in absolutely everything that lives or has ever lived in every single crystal. And they say God is everywhere. Could these be the nerve endings of God in every single molecule of this planet?
Well, we've talked about this, and this is where people are able to see auras. And I think, Dave, you and I talked about this, and you suspect or you believe that this is the cloud, the Ormus cloud that exists in everything.
Yeah, we think so. Especially in metals, where you have concentrations of metals. You know, because you go through all these processes to concentrate a metal, and the accompaniment with it is this auric cloud that moves wherever the metal is, regardless of what the metal is. You know? So we'll see. And I mean, Brown's gas appears to be ormic oxygen hydrogen, which means there would be an ormic form of materials other than the metals. You know, there's like about 44 of them now have been isolated. So, you know, Ricky did some dowsing a while ago. She will douse over a periodic table the mineral content of various types of waters that we collect from various springs. Like we got 15 different waters that we brought back from 15 different springs in Saratoga, New York, Saratoga Springs. Anyway, she was dowsing these and writing down all of the mineral analysis of it, and she had one sample, and she doused element 110. And I'm thinking, you know, how can you douse element 110? It doesn't exist in nature. At least that's what we were told. So she said, well, I don't know. I thought, well, maybe you're getting tired. Leave it a while. So she's going through this thing again 4 days later, and she douses element 110. So I looked it up, and element 110 is something called darmstadtium, and it was isolated in the German city of Darmstadt. And what they did is they fired, I believe, hydrogen particles into whatever it was they were trying to hit, and they read one particle with a 3-second half-life and another one like a 3.5-minute half-life. So they said, okay, that's it, bang, bang. They did their thing. They did their submission and their application for recognition for discovering darmstadtium. I think what may be happening is when these guys are firing particles through their cyclotrons, they are actually hitting materials that they don't really know they're there. I have a feeling that all of the materials beyond uranium, beyond 92 on the periodic table, already exist in their stable ormic condition. And when they're finding these things or creating them, so it always bothered me that you smash two things together and create something. I try that with two cars, see what you get. You know, but how can you smash something together to create something? Wouldn't it be more likely that they are smashing something into something they don't know what's there, which is a stable ormic molecule, and damaging it and destabilizing it and reading off the residues when they destabilize it? We could possibly have several hundred elements, all of them very complex, but existing in their ormic condition, which is chemically neutral, so we don't detect them because all of our chemistries look for energy exchanges. And they're just always there until such times as we damage one or break one. And then they become fissionable and break down into simpler forms. So I don't know, maybe these guys have got it all backwards, but I mean, who the hell am I, right?
Yeah, interesting world we live in today. Well, we've been talking for quite a while now. I think this is a good point to kind of bring it to a close, but I want to give everybody any closing remarks around the table here. Jack, got any closing? Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I've been listening to a lot of what you're saying about the Ormus and the gold and the consciousness of this. I haven't studied hardly anything into the Ormus, but everything that you've said about that makes a lot of sense. And as you're saying, it fits into a lot of the other things that I've studied and I had an understanding of. I think that if you study more about classical Western and Eastern alchemy, a lot of what you're doing with that, it will help bring in both the analytical science of it as well as the spiritual science outside of dowsing and everything else, because it'd be studying the spirit as a science itself, not not quite as abstract, but more methodical research. And I think that would that'd be very good.
Yeah. Well, every one of our bottles, the label says on it, it's where science and spirit converge. And I think a lot of the new way of thinking is to bring together all of these things we know. We shouldn't be opposing science and religion. We shouldn't be, opposing black and white. These all have to come together, and once they do, they start to facilitate each other. And once you start that, you start reversing this whole process of polarizing that the Illuminati do when they use their divide and conquer system.
Oh, yes.
We start bringing it back together. That's the reversal of their system. So I mean,
Well, have you heard the latest what they've done with the CERN device?
No. Not exactly.
They have a statue, and I don't know what it's made out of, but it's the Indonesian god of death. And apparently, they've positioned this thing in the magnetron area of the CERN device, and I don't know. There's a lot of speculation out there. A lot of these conspiracy theorists are saying, well, what are they trying? They're trying to rein in this god of death using a CERN device. Well, and then the next question is, why are they doing this? Well, and then you get in a little bit deeper. Do you know that they are their own country, and everybody that works in the CERN works with, that works in the perimeter of their own country? They don't even have to pay any taxes, and they've got retirement benefits out the, they'll have a pension for life if they leave, and it just they're not subjected to any international laws.
Well, they make the laws to benefit themselves,
Yeah.
It almost sounds like another Denver airport. We went to Denver Airport. Wow, what a place.
Yeah.
What a place. The energy. We went there, and in like half an hour, Ricky was totally exhausted. He says, I got to get the hell out of here. The energies in that place are phenomenal. Do you guys know about the Denver Airport?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's an interesting endeavor, and I mean, well, I don't know. I just hope they keep wasting their resources, and eventually these things start to fail.
Well, they say that when they kick on that CERN device, this guy on bpearthwatch.com he's a little bit of a doom and gloomer, but he seems to be making a connection with science and using satellite topographies that when they kick this thing on, it is definitely having an effect on the magnetic field, that's the shields that surround this Earth to protect it from these solar flares that we get. And I guess this thing, they use helium, liquid helium, to chill this thing when it's going down to I think it's like, oh geez, what was it? It was very cold.
Absolute zero, yeah.
Yeah, very cold.
Minus 273 degrees Kelvin or so.
Yeah. And the field that this thing pulls in is over 100,000 times Earth's gravity.
I know, and they're messing with this stuff, and they don't even know what gravity is. And they don't know, they don't know. It's like the Eldridge all over again. They haven't a clue. That's the Philadelphia experiment. You know?
Yeah.
It's total insanity. It's like a blind guy standing out there aiming a gun, trying to not hit the wrong thing. They haven't a clue.
Well,
I'll
there's
tell you
there's a suggestion on the table. I don't know. Should I volunteer that, guys?
Sure, go ahead.
Jack and Tobias, what you could do? Show them.
With what exactly?
You want to give a demonstration?
Using cut crystals?
Well, yeah. Why don't you give them a little sample of what you can do? Dave, are you game?
Sure.
All right. So, we're going to start this off with, I don't know, Jack. I'm going to let you guys, Jack and Tobias, let you guys take over from here because you guys are very well versed with this. You want to start with a body scan or what?
Sure, take it away, Jack. You can do that.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, they need a little time to kind of get dialed in here, but what they're going to do here is give you a demonstration of what they do. And I would fashion it to something like Reiki, but it's long distance, and they use remote viewing techniques.
Yeah, well, there really is no distance, so.
Yeah, there you go.
So, how much is this Ormus do you ingest on a daily basis?
Usually about a teaspoon. 5 milliliters.
Well, there's a very interesting energy cascading effect around your body, and it's not something I'm typically familiar with being around people's bodies, so. Do you have a bunch of this stuff bottled all around you? Is that where you refine this stuff?
Yeah, we make everything in our kitchen. I just made up 9 gallons of it yesterday.
Okay.
And, we have our supply for shipping is downstairs in our house. So.
Well, it's that same gaseous energy I was seeing before when I was scanning one of your bottles of Ormus, but it seems to be all around your body, and it seems to, as you're saying with the pulling, because there are weak electromagnetic fields that are emitted from the body, because each one of because they call it a chakra because there's a spinning energy field there. As you know, again with your blood is basically rolling around through your veins and it's emitting an energy field. So the Ormus is both within your body and it almost seems like there's a pulling effect outwards from your body, and it seems to be going at maybe like 25-degree angles radiating from all out your body. If you were to do like a connect the dot thing, and you were to go around the silhouette of your body at each one of these dots, I can see it roughly going at a 25-degree angle from your body, and it's emitting out into the walls of the room that you're in.
It is unusual.
Yeah. I don't know. There was a curious thing happened to me. A few years ago, I had a heart attack. And then I had to have a bypass done 3 years ago. It'd be 3 years ago this May. And I fit a study that they were doing for stem cell research study. It was a private study, and they wanted 20 people in Toronto and 20 people in Montreal. And I fit their criteria because I'd had the previous heart attack. And what the study was is when they were doing the bypass, they were going to take samples of stem cell material from my hip, do their processing 3 or 4 hours before, and then inject it into the old infarction in the heart muscle. So they did all this, and obviously I recovered. I'm here. Not something you really want to do. But anyway, about a month later, all these queries were coming up, and they were talking to the docs that were overseeing the the protocols and so on for the stem cell study. And I was getting a little better, and then they contacted me and my wife Ricky. Apparently, the stem cells that they took from my hip, there was 5 times as many as anybody they'd tested in the program, and they were healthier than anything that had been tested in the program as well. So I'm thinking some of that has to do with the Ormic material. However, we don't have another example to compare it to, But I'm pretty well back to normal in almost everything, and there's no effects from any of this stuff, So for what that's worth, I don't know.
No, makes sense to me.
Yeah, you can't put a price on normal, can you?
No.
Hey, that's a good place to be, right?
Yeah. But the reason we work with this Ormus is to teach people, to educate people. We teach people how to make it if they're interested. And that's it. The whole purpose of what we do, we consider ourselves facilitators. And what we facilitate is to help viable people be more viable by eliminating some of these little discrepancies that make them less viable.
Oh, yeah.
That's the purpose in life,
Anything else you see?
Well, as I was discussing with this Ormus energy, I'm not used to this. This is a new phenomena for me, trying to see through this energy field. So at this point in time, I can't really make, other than what I just said, I can't really make heads or tails out of what's going on inside of your body because of I guess I'm too distracted by what's going on with the Ormus, because again, this is completely new to me.
Well, we're going to have to get you some stuff out there and let you play with it.
Sure.
Because it's interesting. Has Gwen or has Dale got your addresses and stuff, and I'll send some out to you. You guys can see what you can.
We'll take care of that off the air once we
great.
get off the air here. Yeah.
Yeah, Dale's got all that stuff. Yep.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a good place to call it a night, and I want to thank you, Dave, for coming back for part 2. And
You're very welcome.
Yeah, man, I always enjoy talking with you, man. It's just always a wealth of knowledge, and it's so refreshing to hear something different that hasn't been regurgitated time and time again for decades on top of decades.
Well,
and
things, you got to take them. You got to take all this stuff with a grain of skepticism, and look at the intent of the people behind it.
There you go.
The intent is what will carry, always.
Well, all of us, I can say this genuinely, all of us, with me and the headbands, with these two, what they do with the crystals and their healing techniques, what you do with the Ormus, that's our intent.
Absolutely.
We're definitely not in it for the money. And we're doing it, it's just, we've reached a point where it's like, well, if humanity wants to go down this dark road and they want to stay plugged into it, we're not here to stand in their way. That's their free will. That's their free choice. But for the ones that want to reach out and they're tired of it and want to, walk a different path than the status quo, well, hey, we're here. Check us out.
Yeah.
So I think that's why we're all talking tonight. It's time. We're finding each other. Yeah, this kind of sounds a little low.
Yeah. All these dark guys, man, you have to forgive them.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. And they aren't going to listen to us. They'll exhaust themselves, that's all.
Right.
But, you still have to forgive them because I guess in their heads they think they're doing the best they can do. So you can't fault people for that. It's just kind of weird the way it comes out,
Well, hold on right here, Dave, and We'll get with you in just a moment, but I want to thank everybody that's listening to this show on YouTube here on Dale After Dark, and stay tuned for the next show, folks. Don't know where that's going to be yet, but I'm working on it. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great night. If you have an interesting story or cutting-edge information and would like to be a guest on Dale After Dark, contact Dale at spiritofmountshasta.com. To hear all the latest shows and updates, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Dale After Dark. Embrace the night.